Yeah. I'm here to change the game up. I'm here to shuffle up the deck. You'll probably think I'm famous because I got...
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Running Through It podcast. 2 episodes in the same week. Don't you just love it? On today's episode, I'm interviewing Lee Troop, who, if you listen to my Jake Riley interview a few weeks back, is Jake's coach. We talked about Lee on that podcast. We talked about Jake a little bit on this podcast, a little bit of synergy. So if you haven't listened to that podcast, please go back and do so before you finish this one. They're not necessary, but I like them both. So I'm a little bit selfish in that way. This talk with Lee was one of my favorite I've done on this podcast because I think we get into some things that are general themes that we talk about from time to time that I think you guys will enjoy. I think you'll have a lot to take away at the end of this, learn a little bit, feel some feelings, and Lee's an awesome dude. He's an Australian Olympian. He's coached here in the U.S. for a while now, and we kind of got into his coaching career and some struggles and things that have happened in his life and his career that I think we can all take a little bit away from. Something about Lee is just that he's very genuine and very transparent, and can't say enough good words about the guy. So without taking up too much more time, I'll throw to the interview and we'll talk after this. Whatever. How's everything been going for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a tough and trying time for everyone at the moment. So obviously we've finally got some indication on the Olympics and what's happening with that. But yeah, like I said, it's just it's a tough time for everyone. So just everyone's taking it day by day.
How have you been? Well, what kind of changes have you been making, like personally, and just how has everything been affected by all this for you?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm affected, as a father and as a husband and as a owner of a business and as a coach. So, it's been a little daunting having to take a big deep breath and realise, that from my event business point of view, like I'll be out of work for 8 months, and so that's pretty tough, and that's if things do get back to normal. And from a coaching perspective, I mean, obviously the postponement of the Olympics for Jake has been another thing that we've had to try and deal with. And obviously, at least we know that it's a postponement and not a cancellation, right, which is good. But then I also have track athletes as well who unfortunately are impacted upon because there's going to be no track season for them. And, particularly with one young girl that I've got, this was a big chance for her to prove her worth this season before we transition to roads and marathon next year. And David Goodman's a steeplechaser, and there aren't any road steeplechase events, so having to try to recalibrate him and obviously try and make it as positive as possible, even though it's still disappointing. And then kids, obviously they're out of school, so overnight I became a homeschool teacher, and that's pretty daunting itself. So, but as I said, it's just got to take a big deep breath, and I keep saying to myself that there are people out there that are a lot worse off than me, and trying to sort of take somewhat of a positive approach to what is sort of a bit of a negative time. Yeah,
kind of take some of the good out of it. Something that's helped me because I don't know, I have trouble with things that I don't have control over, right? So it's coming to terms with the fact nothing I do is necessarily going to be able to fix this. It's out of my hands, and just accepting that.
Yeah, and I mean that comes with, I think, age, and it also comes with maturity. And you've sort of got to be the voice of reason a lot of times, particularly with your athletes and your family. And if you're crumbling under pressure, then they're going to feel that, and then that doesn't give them a lot of hope as well. So you want to try to make sure that, in this trying time, that you can be as positive as possible. And even though internally it's a sad time, as I said, I don't want to be out of work. And,
right.
I enjoy putting on running races for kids right through to elites. And, and then obviously from a coach point of view, I want to be at races, I want to be at Stanford and Peyton and Mount Sac and, seeing my athletes perform. So it's certainly a tough transition going from everything that we've had to all of a sudden having nothing. But the thing is, the whole world's in this, like there's no exception to this rule. Like we're all going to have to make sacrifices and have to make commitments to try and flatten the curve and make sure we can get over this pandemic as quick as possible.
Yeah, have you talked to Jake about everything? How's he feeling right now with obviously his big breakthrough, and then like on the heels of that have it up in the air?
Yeah, so the good thing is, and I'd heard Jake say on your podcast that one thing I like to stress is like having a break, and sometimes we have these great performances, but we don't take time to celebrate and enjoy it. Like we want to get onto the next event as quickly as possible, and I certainly know for myself as a previous athlete and a past athlete that was a mistake for me. And it's not until you end up my age and you look back on things and you're like, I really wish I had appreciated that a lot more. So this month of March was always him taking a break, and that's not to say that his brain's not ticking over 24/7, but the decision obviously for either cancellation or postponement was beyond our control. I guess the fortunate thing is, if you can look long term, is that we will get back to some form of normality, and there will be races and there will be events that he'll be able to do, but the Olympics is obviously a childhood dream for him. So he's been on that knife edge like tens of thousands of other athletes waiting for a decision to be made. And, thankfully that decision's been made. And now the next thing is, when will it be? We've heard that the Olympics could be as early as spring, or it could be going into the summer. And the Olympics have to be done before the summer, and that's the agreement that Japan and the IOC have come up with. So a lot of our forward planning is going to be based on when they decide that this Olympic marathon is going to be. So, like to throw some hypotheticals up, we know Boston has moved to September, and, if we decided that we wanted to do Boston in September, then Boston rolls around in April. And if the Olympics are going to be in late summer, I wouldn't want to have Jake have 3 extremely hard races in a row of a Boston Olympics. There's possibilities that we could look at Chicago, have him run fast, because I'm certainly convinced that he could run 2:08 on a good day, whether that's Berlin, which would then, doing something a little earlier would open up the door for him to possibly do, say, Tokyo Marathon in February, and give him some experience of traveling to Japan and getting used to the travel. And obviously the culture is a great lead into what he would do 3 or 4 months later. If he did New York, then he wouldn't be able to do a fall marathon, because that would be really close. So at the moment, obviously we're still up in the air, despite the fact that we know that the Olympics have been postponed. But we're also up in the air with what's going to happen in the fall. Like there's still no 100% guarantees that Berlin, Chicago, New York are all going to go ahead, because at the moment we're not even at the the halfway point or the crisis point of what this pandemic is meant to do. So again, we can sort of put some plans down and we can talk about things, but we also have to err on the side of caution that might not be what will happen. And we just need to keep changing our plans as we move along with more information that's given to us.
Yeah. Well, you seem to have like a very cautious approach. Has there been like anything in your coaching or athletic life that's kind of like led you to this moment, as far as like your mindset and like preparedness?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm any different from any other athlete right now.
Right.
Obviously there's disappointment of not being able to have an Olympic Games, and you've put in years of training, and some athletes may right now be in the best shape of their life, and how are they going to be able to hold that for another 12 months? And, then there'll be other athletes that are probably were a little bit premature this year, that probably might have made the trials but weren't really good enough to make the team. But in another 12 months, that'll give them that hardened steel of, having to, work a little bit harder to get there. So there are so many different things that come into play. And like I said, as an athlete, I'm not going to anything different than what athletes have. But I think as a coach, and being much older and looking at things now with the glass being half full as opposed to being half empty, just gives you a balanced perspective. And, let's not in any way, shape or form devalue that there are people that are now unemployed. There are people that have just lost their businesses, and there are also people that are dying. So, at the end of the day, sport's a great catalyst for people to come together and celebrate. but that can only be done when the whole world's unified and together as one. And at the moment, we're not. We're very broken and very fractured. So I think, it would be extremely difficult to put an event on when the rest of the world is going through what it's going through. So, and I also think that comes with being a dad as well and having kids and valuing what's really important. Whereas when I was single and when I was just running was my life. That's all I cared about. I wanted to go to the Olympics. I wanted to break records. I wanted to win races. And, I was selfish, not in a bad way, just in a good way because you had to be. But now, it's more about life and, looking at other people and how you can contribute and how you can pick people up when they're down and then also help them along their journey when things are going great.
Yeah, it's interesting because, running from a sports perspective, obviously, there are a lot bigger issues and everyone is being affected by it, but running from a health and fitness standpoint right now is more important than ever. It's funny how those two things intercept. So the sport aspect of running itself is something that needs to be put on the back burner, but the process of running and training and having something to actually give you some sort of structure in your life is more important now than ever.
Yeah, and people started out that way. I mean, a lot of people started out as a junior that, all right, they might have had a dream of making the Olympics, but it was all about health and fitness and participation. And, there's a whole trickle-down effect. I know we're talking about our Olympic athletes, but, look at the high school kid that's missed his senior year to get out there and impress a college for a scholarship. And then look at the last year college athlete that has now missed his opportunity or her opportunity to impress a sponsor that they could get a professional contract. And then look at those that do these races that are raising money for charities and have got, have set themselves up a goal where they wanted to lose weight and this is what they focused on. So a lot of people are affected, just through our sport of running. And I think at times it's important to realise that everyone is affected and we've got to have appreciation for everyone, regardless of the level of athlete, because everyone's out there with a goal that they've been working on, and for some of them, they might not, get that opportunity to fulfill that goal now.
Yeah, I think you just have to be willing to adapt and switch gears and look at those process goals as opposed to end result goals. Is there
Absolutely.
Is there any advice that you'd be able to give to I have a lot of non-professional runners obviously that listen to the podcast, people that are working from home now that are used to going to work every day and don't have that structure that they're used to. Is there any advice from your background as a professional athlete, as a professional coach that you could give to somebody just looking for that motivation to just get out the door once a day? And
yeah, I think the most important thing to realize is that even though our circumstances have changed, that we can still keep structure.
Yeah, right.
People would run at 8 o'clock in the morning or they'd run at 5 o'clock at night, and there's no reason why that still can't be done. I mean, even though we have stay-at-home laws that have been invoked, you're still allowed to get out there and walk and hike and bike ride and walk a dog, provided that you are enforcing 6 foot of social distancing. So I think we're really, really lucky. As I said, a lot of us are looking at the glass being half empty and not half full, and that you can still get out there and run. I mean, getting out there and hammering a hard run still gives you an endorphin release. It still allows you to release some tension and anxiety and stress
for sure.
While you get out there and do it. The training cycle of still going out there and doing your long run doesn't change. Granted, if people are training in a group, that does, because you can't obviously get out there and run in groups based on the social distancing. But I think if you can just recalibrate and, just look at, okay, what are the variables that I can control and what are the variables that I can't? And with the variables that you can't control, there's no point getting upset and wasting energy on it. Look at the variables that you can control and see what you can adapt, and for some people that, may have to work from home and have kids, that might mean getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get your run in, as opposed to you used to leave work and get a lunchtime run in. I know gyms have closed, and I know a lot of people aren't going to get the benefit, especially if it's a single parent. They can't get out the door.
Yeah.
But that might be just implementing, if they've got a treadmill, doing a treadmill workout, or it might be just doing something completely different and just doing a stay-at-home gym workout when the kids are having a nap or if they're having lunch. So in this time, you've just got to be really creative and try to come up with something that's going to allow you to, A, burn some energy, but also keep your sanity. and then just realize that this is really at the moment a short-term problem. Like, this won't last forever, and that what you have to deal with and what you're going to put in place to help give you, some fitness, there's a lot of other people that are in the same boat. And so just to take stock of that you're not the only one affected, and, get online. I mean, we live in a world now where obviously online is just easily at hand to be able to see things that you can do in order to stay fit and healthy. And as I said, to try and give you a little bit of balance. Like I always say, healthy body, healthy mind.
Yeah, for sure.
I've been using the time to cook at home and, get my kids involved in, making pizzas and, talking about certain foods and from what country of origin it's from. So
that's really cool.
Trying to create history and geography and, culinary arts, and then getting them out the door, once a day to just go for a walk or just go for a run. So I'm trying to adapt in what's a pretty crazy time as well.
Yeah, I baked the other day. That was something I haven't done in a while. So, yeah, there's room for hobbies now that there wasn't necessarily before. I like to think of it like from a personal experience of like having that one thing that like kind of keeps things normal. So in college, I was going through like really bad just anxiety period, and I ended up dropping out of college for a semester. And like I was out of college, I was off the team for the time because I was just like really trying to take care of myself. And like when things were falling apart and felt like my whole world was upside down, like just the semblance of like getting out the door for a run, even though I wasn't running every day at that point, was like a lot. It was humbling. It was like that one sense of normalcy of my like usual life that wasn't there typically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I started running because my father wanted to lose weight, and, I ran through school and I really wasn't that great, but, just over years I got better and better and better with, lack of injuries and, just continually absorbing that training. And then, one day I started making teams and, then I had a 20-year career, and, one of the toughest adjustments that I had was once I retired from running, was like, what the hell am I going to do? And, I lost all sense of structure and, to be honest, like I sort of really lost a little bit of purpose of life, because that's what I'd done for 30 plus years. And that's what I'd been used to. Like I trained every morning, I trained every night, I ran 200 kilometers a week or, 120 miles a week. And I was extremely structured. I knew what I would eat Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And, I knew when I'd have my physical therapy appointments, when I'd had to go to the gym. Like I really lived this monotonous life, but there was structure and routine. And once I retired, I lost that, and I certainly lost, personally for me, sense of purpose. And it took me a while to try and put all that energy into other things, which led to coaching, and it led to work, and it led to all these other things, because I'd been doing that all on my own, and that's what I'd been used to. So that was just such a huge transition when I retired, to try and work out what I wanted to do and how I would do it. I'm a workaholic. I have to work. If I'm not working, it just leads me to be in a really, bad place of like feeling depressed and unmotivated and worthless. So the more I work, the better I feel. And but yeah, like I said, even though I went from athlete to coach and to putting on events, that transition was extremely difficult to do. But I eventually got there, and now I'm in another difficult situation like everyone else, and I've just got to work out how I navigate through all of this to stay positive and upbeat and productive.
Yeah, there's learning opportunities here that we can take going forward. How like we can respond through adversity. It always makes you stronger when you come out the other side.
And hopefully people realise that maybe a lot of the things that they really thought were important, they realise now probably weren't, and that there's just a greater sense of just interacting and community and just interaction. So I think, we're probably going to see a lot of people just come back to the very basic essence. I mean, we're seeing, just some unbelievable human efforts at the moment of people going well and beyond for others, whether that's shopping for elderly or, like trying to work with people that are affected with COVID. Look at our doctors and our nurses and workers. Like we're really starting to see the best in some people come out, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's definitely, you can take a lot of positives from it, as much as like reading the news every day is depressing. So you got to look at some sort of bright side. But okay, has this kind of changed, because I know Jake was still like unsigned, has this kind of changed your approach to like looking at contract deals and potential sponsorship with everything being in upheaval? Has that been something that you guys have discussed?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we had already had a lot of things planned with Jake, a number of speaking engagements and a number of appearances at races, and we'd already mapped out the races that we were planning to do, which included like the BAA 5K, Boulder, Peyton Jordan. We're going to get him back on the track to run a 10K. So all those things obviously have been affected, and there's no doubt that the contracts are on hold at the moment while everyone's navigating through this time. So it's just a really, really difficult place right at the minute, and that's not to say that things won't happen. Just like the Olympics, everything's just on pause at the minute. I mean, people are being made redundant, and people are being told to work from home. And like just as far as running goes, I mean, shoe companies can only be profitable by what they sell. And so if running stores are closed because they're not a necessity, and I know people can buy online, but if people aren't at running races and they're not going to expos, that seems to have the trickle-down effect that the money that a lot of the brands had put aside because they foresaw what would be happening through the remainder of 2020, that now has been put on hold and frozen while they look at where they can drive some of that other money. I mean, we just saw Lululemon and New Balance dedicate $2 million to research, obviously, with this pandemic. So things have, sort of come to just a little bit of a halt. And that's fine. And obviously with the companies we are speaking to, like there's complete open and honest communication. So it's not like we're being blindsided. We're just being told that just for the minute, we just have to put things on hold until, we really navigate to where we're going to be and what's going to happen on the other side. I mean, this could be a 4-week thing. This could be a 3-month thing. We really don't know. So there seems to be more questions than answers at the moment, but we certainly understand and appreciate the situation that every single person's in, and we've waited this long. I don't really see it as a problem waiting that extra 2 or 3 months. And as I said, it's there are far greater things going on in the world at the moment. Like I said, with the most severe being people dying, than us worrying about what contract we're going to get and how many zeros are on it.
Yeah, it's certainly understandable. There are a lot bigger issues to be worrying about. And it's like, I feel bad because I want to have this podcast as like a kind of relief from all that, but at a certain point, it's like such an important topic that you almost like can't mention it, especially with everything going on in the sport that I like cover for the most part. But
yeah, and I think that's because people don't know how to talk about it. Because there's just so much uncertainty. And, I think, and it's been interesting over the last, 48 hours looking at athletes' response to the postponement. And, a lot of them have, they've expressed disappointment and wholeheartedly, that it was the right call to be made, and, sacrificing, I guess the joy of what they would want to express by just sort of saying, look, this isn't the time, and what decision's been made is for the betterment of mankind. But then you get some other athletes that don't share that, right? And so you then see the backlash of everything that comes from that. And, particularly in these times, like you have to be really careful with how you approach it and how you talk about it, because these things can either make you look like a great human being, but it can also make you look like a real selfish twat. So, we've been very mindful of making sure that as much as Jake's race was fantastic, and, obviously there's the postponement, that right now it's not the time to really celebrate that, but it is the time to obviously have the conversation and try to give people hope in a time where there doesn't seem to be, and, I'm not talking about, regardless of people's lines of politics and religion and things like that. I think at the end of the day, it's just like trying to let people know that we're all in this together. And, if you've got questions, ask them. If you need help with something, please reach out. And, like I said, it's a tough time, but I also think it's a good time, for people to really go beyond themselves, to really show who they are. So, again, I'd rather focus on the glass being half full.
Yeah, and I like Jared and Jake's response is like, it's okay to be disappointed. Like, it's only natural that you're going to be a little bit bummed that your Olympic dream that you've been dreaming about since a kid isn't going to come to fruition like you planned it to be. But like also understanding that like your problem is something that you're like in a privileged position to like have as a problem.
I know, and I mean, yesterday, I got inundated with, will they do the trials rerun? And I'm like, no, why would they do that? Like, they've already announced these 3 men and women as Olympians. You couldn't do it again, and then all of a sudden have 6 men and women. And then people are like, well, they'll have to prove their fitness, and others are like, no, they've deserved their spot. And my whole point in all of this was just like, look, if we have to prove our fitness, that's fine. I mean, the difference between now and next year is that there was only 5 months between the trials and the Olympics. So,
right.
Jake pretty well proved his fitness in that race, along with the other five marathoners. But in 17 months, so many things can happen at that time. And so I wouldn't think that saying, look, at the very, very least, we'd like to see the women do a half marathon in 75 minutes and the men do a half marathon in 65 minutes is that bad a thing. I mean, we're planning on doing 1 to 2 marathons anyway, whether it's a fall marathon and a spring marathon. We will do probably 1 or 2 half marathons. We'll probably do a couple of 10K races. And Jake wants to race. I mean, he's been starved of opportunities for 3 years, right? And he just wants to get out there and race as hard as he can, be the best version of himself. And so I don't think it changes anything for us. Like, we will still do what we can do. And I think looking at the results between now and next year, he will prove his fitness. But it's funny how people are trying to sort of make a much bigger deal out of this than they need to. Like, we're fine. Like, we don't need people to go to bat for us. And, I have, some empathy for USATF because, like, this is uncharted waters for them. Like, I mean, everything to them is by the rules. And then all of a sudden we have a situation where there's been no rule developed for this. And so they also need their time to make sure that they protect themselves as a governing body and also protect the athletes that made the team. And they will need to look at, their bylaws and how that, and their selection criteria to make sure that they protect the athletes now. So I don't really think this is the time to just like attack and go full mode on everyone. Like I said, it's like, we'll be fine. The sun will come back up for us tomorrow. And, Jake's still tutoring. I mean, there are kids that aren't in school now, so they're going to need a tutor more than ever to be able to help them with their homeschooling. And so the importance of Jake as a tutor, I think, and helping these young kids, like, is far more greater than what's going to happen in 17 months. I mean, these kids are relying on their SATs and everything to get to college. And so I would think Jake's role right now is more important than it's ever been and far greater than being an Olympic athlete. So again, I think, if we just all take a step back and we look at things in complete transparency and focus on really what's important now, they're the things that are important, and they're the things that, I admire Jake for and have complete admiration for him. I mean, he's been through the hard side. I mean, we've all heard his story, and I appreciated your podcast with him because you certainly you asked questions that were in a different light that showcased a lot more of what Jake is as a human being. And like I said, with what we're going through now, he will rise to the occasion and he'll help as many kids as he can to obviously fulfill their dream of going from high school to a great college.
I love Jake's story, and I love, I think that people that have been through that type of adversity, there's just so much more that they have to give, even, obviously outside of the running standpoint of it, just from, a life perspective. I think those lessons are, transferable from what you've learned from running, what you learned from life. Makes you a better runner, makes you a better person. They're not mutually exclusive traits to have.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I went through all of that, as an athlete that, coached myself and went to 3 Olympics, and then I, then became a coach, and, and then, obviously people know I had the unfortunate circumstance of dealing with the death of John Gray a couple of years ago. And, then that changed again. I mean, we all go through different things that have a bearing on us, whether that's positive or negative, but you just hope that once you come through all of that, that you become better. And, I've said a few times, I don't know if I'm better as a coach right now. I mean, I definitely know I'm different. And just because Jake made the Olympics, I don't think it's the case of celebrating something on a, on a materialistic output of, because he made the Olympics, you have to be better.
Yeah.
For me, coaching has always been a very singular thing of working with each individual through, the mental, the physical, also the emotional. So we all adapt, and I think every person has a story to tell, and every person's gone through something, and that's how they've come through it, and what they're continuing to try to do, I think, is the most important thing, and how they should be judged, and that's regardless of results.
Yeah. Not mean to get too personally, but what brought you back to coaching after what happened to John?
To be honest, like, there's probably two things, and two athletes, and this is not putting any athlete down, but I was, pretty sure at the time that I didn't want to coach.
Yeah.
I think the biggest fear for me was going through that again, because you do, as it sort of unfolds and as time goes on, you start to look at yourself, and you become very negative with yourself.
There's an emotional bond there too.
Yeah, I mean, you start to look at, like, what did I miss? What could I have prevented? What did I do? And guilt's a terrible thing to have. And, for me personally, I had a really tough time sort of dealing with that. And I felt that, me stepping away from coaching was probably the best thing to do. And I certainly wasn't personally in a great place. I was in a pretty dark place, and there were other things. I'd had a running store, and unfortunately my running store went under, just due to the fact that I wasn't really on the same page with our corporate owners, and I don't know, I just it was one thing after another, and I felt like I was on this downward spiral, and I just couldn't control anything. I just felt like one thing after another was happening, and as much as I kept trying, things just became worse. And I don't know, I guess I had to really hit rock bottom and go through what I went through. And I was coaching a young girl at the time called Carrie Verdon, and what had happened was she had started working with me in around about August, and Carrie's an elementary school teacher, so I was getting up at 6 o'clock to coach her, and that was separate from the group that I was coaching. And I would just, get up, I'd ride the bike, or, time splits, or, as we sort of got into winter, it was just driving the car behind her so that she could have lights on. And I told that handful of people that were still there that, look, I needed to the end of the year. There was no guarantees that I was planning to coach beyond that, and just sort of asking for just a bit of time to work myself out. And this one particular morning, I was driving along, it was snowing, it might have been 10 degrees, and I'm driving my van behind Carrie as she's doing a workout, and it just sort of dawned on me at that time, like, how lucky am I to have a front row seat sitting in my van, watching blood, sweat and tears, like a young girl that has this desire and this commitment to be the best runner she can be. And her story was that she was an outstanding junior in California. She got a scholarship to CU. In her first year, she made World Juniors. She finished third at under 20s. But like a number of people that go to college, her last couple of years were met with a lot of injuries and a lot of time out, and that leads to frustration. And so when you graduate from school, the last thing you're thinking about doing is running, because running's become more of a torment rather than a joy. So she took some time out, and then she decided that she wanted to get back into running. And so she was just running and jogging, and she had put together maybe 6 or 12 months of just running around, and she felt healthy again. And there was this desire that she wanted to have one more shot at running. And so that's when she reached out to me. So as she sort of reached out to me, as she's on the way up, I'm on my way down. But I just said, look, I'd help you out to the end of the year, because, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I wasn't really sleeping anyway. And so I didn't feel that helping her out as an individual was really taking away from this whole group aspect. But yeah, like I said, it just dawned on me this morning when I'm driving that, how lucky am I, and that here's a girl that has put her trust in me, and I need to work out if I want to do this, but if I did want to continue doing it, like, how cool is it to see that, I saw that in Laura, and I've seen that in Sean Quigley, and I certainly saw that in John, and I know it just sort of smacked me on the side of the head to wake up. And at the same time, it was Jake as well. Jake had gone through his surgery. I wasn't really coaching Jake because he'd had his time off. He was in a boot, he was on crutches, and then he went to just doing some stability and strength work, to running 1 minute a day, walking 9 minutes and building up. And as he was starting to get to that point of he could actually ramp it up a little bit, that sort of all happened at the same time. And so there wasn't any pressure at the time to I wasn't really coaching them, I was just helping them, if that makes any sense.
No, totally.
But they were ready to go to that next level, and I had to make that decision as to whether I was in or out. And I'm just really thankful that I decided to get back in. I'm certainly, I only have 5 athletes on my elite team, and I've certainly had a number of people reach out to see if there was the opportunity for me to coach them. And personally, I'm just not in that place right now. These kids I've been with for some time, and so selfishly, I have this buffer with just me and them. And hopefully, as we sort of move along and, we start to do more, we start to explore more, that maybe that guard will come down. But just for right now, I really, really enjoy and love what I have. And it certainly reminds me of when I very first started way back in the day of, 2010 to 2013, of just having that small group of people and trying to build up something pretty awesome and fantastic with just those people. So, yeah, that's how I got back into coaching. I mean, it's not really a great story, but that's just how it all seemed to unfold. And, Carrie's had her success as well. I mean, the day Jake finished second at the Olympic trials, Carrie finished second at the Pan American Cross Country Championships, and that month earlier, she finished third at the Open Cross Country Championships in San Diego. So, considering that her last great success was when she was a junior, to then finally having some success these years later, it certainly made for a very fantastic day. And I was just as proud of her performance on that day in Canada as I was at Jake's in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a great story to come back from that disappointment of high school and college to being able to actually have some success as a pro runner. But I feel I don't know, I have this theory that all great coaches that have a personal bond have a level of emotional intelligence, and I think sometimes that makes you vulnerable for when these things happen to just fall apart, because there's that emotional connection that it's a hard thing to deal with, and grief is real, and you can't just wake up one day and have it be gone.
Yeah, I mean, you become more of a psychologist than a coach sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just wasn't equipped, and that's the honest to God truth. I had been so set in my ways of coaching because that's how I coach myself. But the world's a different place. I mean, if I had a bad workout or if I didn't have a great race, you'd go out with friends and have a beer, and depression really, I mean, even though it sort of was there, it really wasn't paramount as what it is today. I mean, the pressure that young men and women are under is just, it astounds me. And so over the years, I think through my own ignorance, I wasn't adapting. I was still staying as this person. It's my way or the highway. And I also had a problem of I just couldn't say no to athletes. So, if anyone wanted to come in, I sort of had this open door policy. And I don't know, it all falls on me. At the end of the day, I didn't handle things well. I didn't control things well. And before I knew it, I was drowning. And, I just certainly was in a place where I just didn't know how I was going to get out of it. And still to this day, I mean, I know John's been gone for over 2 years, but, I certainly miss him intensely because, John was one of those guys that he trained hard, he raced hard, and even though sometimes as a coach I had some challenging moments with him, I still took a lot of joy in races. I mean, when he ran the Cal International and he didn't stick to the plan and he blew up 5 kilometers earlier than what he should have because he went 5 kilometers too early. That was John, when he ran the Club Cross in San Francisco and he got second to Gareth Heath. He went way too early and, Gareth got him in the last 400 meters. And, it just, even though he was challenging, he was also it was exciting to work with him. And, like I said, having worked with Laura Thweed and Sean Quigley and, John Gray and, obviously with Jake and Parry, I certainly am invested into them as individual people, and I probably coach more from an emotional side than just, here's your training program and let's look at the science that comes with that, and how can we adapt to modern technologies to be better. So I think that's why obviously John's death hit me hard, and it just took me a while to be, all right, how do I now learn from that? How do I become better? How can I still contribute that sane and allows me to enjoy what I do, but at the same time I'm still working with that athlete and giving them what they need. So it's still a learning process. Can certainly say I've eaten some humble pie to realise that I don't know it all, and I'm certainly prepared to learn as I move along and continue to grow in the role that I'm in now.
Yeah, it's tough too, because you're like seeing someone every day. I know that was something that me and my college coach had to kind of work through, because like I said, I had an issue. I was just having a lot of panic attacks and was just like depressed, but like no one knew, because I was really good at hiding it from people, because I was just keeping everything in myself and just like pushing all my feelings together and keeping them nice and contained until they kind of got out of control. And I was having some suicidal thoughts from that. And when I dropped out of school, I told that to my coach, and she was like a person that saw me every morning and didn't know a thing. So something that we had to kind of work through of, I needed to be more real with her. I needed to talk to her and like actually say my feelings with her. So
yeah, and I mean, that's a tough thing to be honest with, right? And I think that's the thing with myself, is that I've always had this machoistic, like, it's fine, I'll take everything on, and and then when it came to me, like, I didn't know how to deal with it because I'm not a talker. I self-absorb, I take people's problems on, but then I've got my own problems on, and I combusted. And I'm fortunate that I come out of the other side, and I certainly, when people say they're in a very dark place, you don't have to guess exactly what that means. And just there are a number of things that I had to grab onto, like a life vest. I was drowning out in the ocean. There was no boat, and I just had this life vest that I had to keep holding onto, and it was tough to come to that realization that you needed help and you needed to talk to people. And I was very fortunate that I had people like Jim Estes and even Kevin Hansen. I mean, Kevin Hansen, only person I spoke to on the phone the day that John died, and I don't know why I answered that phone call. I certainly didn't answer the phone call, but he said to me that he'd had a very similar experience years ago, and he was up front. He's like, this is going to hurt. He said it, but Lee, it's like you're going to be able to deal with it, but you're never going to be able to forget about it. And they're things that still resonate with me today, like with his honesty about that, and that's okay. Like, I'm not going to forget about it. But
I don't think we're meant to forget about it either.
No, and I think we would be very shallow if we did. But I certainly, I over time just had to put my pride aside and realise that I needed help. And it's certainly been an extremely long process. I mean, I've only talked about this with my parents about a month ago. And it was tough. My dad was crying on the phone because they sort of knew through my lack of communication. I mean, they live all the way in Australia. And so if I'm not speaking to them, they obviously know something's not right, and I'd only speak on birthdays or Christmases. And, so it's tough to then actually go through the process and realise, okay, this is where I was. This is what I've done to rebuild myself. These are the things that I'm now going to put in place to make sure that if it did happen next time, how I would be better prepared. How can I do things that I don't affect people? I mean, through my actions, I affected, a number of people, and you then have to try to work out, okay, well, I didn't handle this well, and at the end of the day, I am only human, and as humans we make mistakes, but it's just trying to learn from that so that next time that doesn't happen. So like I said, I feel like just with where I am now and with who I have, it's a great time. I mean, everyone was super excited about Jake's race, and I should be out there celebrating and partying. That wasn't my time, it was Jake's time. Like, I had my time as an athlete, and I'm there to be supportive of him. And like I said, I'm a different coach from what I was, Again, as to whether I'm better, I don't know. But it's just, I just appreciate the fact that I've got a second chance, and through that second chance, I coached an American Olympian, and I'm hoping with the athletes that I have now that I get just as good, if not better, success with them too.
Yeah, well, I always appreciate your transparency, Lee. I know it's not an easy thing to talk about, but being able to talk about it is sometimes therapeutic.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've come to realize with people, is that I'm not alone. I mean, you just talked about your situation, and I didn't know that. And there are a lot of other people out there that have been in that same or similar situation. And, life's tough. Life can be just really cruel. And, as the old saying of, it's how you bounce back from it that's more important. Or, it doesn't how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up. Like, there are so many cliches that I've tried to go through and, try to use that to try and get myself up. But, at the end of the day, this is just a common thing for many people. And I know that my biggest issue with this was lack of communication, and I know that the issue with a lot of others that are going through the same thing again is just not being able to communicate. So I think the more we can just sort of show our human side. There's nothing special about me. Like, I obviously made 3 Olympics. I worked hard, I trained hard. I'm no different than any other Olympic athlete. I have 3 kids that I try to be a great dad to, and I have a wife that I try to be supportive to. Like, I have my family and friends back home who I try to communicate with. And I think at the end of the day, we're not going to be excellent at everything that we do, but if we can just try and be as good as we can, then that's all that we can ask for.
Yeah, that's a good lesson to end the show on. I don't want to take out too much more of your time, Lee. Where can people find you if they want to talk to you on social media and things?
I'm pretty easy. I mean, my Instagram is just, I think it's Run Troopy, and I think that's my Twitter is Run Troopy. I think my Instagram's just Lee Troop 73, and my Facebook's Lee Troop. I keep all those things open, and everyone gets to see my side of living, and I have a lot of family and friends back home in Australia, and so this is a great way for me to have them involved in my life and seeing what I do and how I do it. So I'm readily accessible, and if I'm walking down the street, people can say g'day. And as I said, there's nothing special about me. I'm easy to just shake. Well, actually, we can't shake hands now, but from social distancing, I can do a virtual handshake.
Yeah, we can pantomime
and
it.
Say g'day. Yeah, I mean, we're Australians, right? So we love everyone, and love to chat, and love to engage. So like I said, I'm easily accessible through those platforms.
All right. Okay. Just to close things out a little bit, I will be back next week with a couple more interviews. So we'll just keep this rolling since, I don't know, I got nothing else to do, right? Again, you can follow Lee at RunTroopy on Twitter. Again, he sends out a lot of good coaching nuggets, things that you can definitely take into your own training in your own life. But in the meantime, if you like what you heard, you can make sure you tell a friend, subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast if you want. And you can follow me at WonderkerJustin on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to follow the podcast page exclusively, you can follow at RunThroughItPod. And I will be back again soon. So remember, in the meantime, to keep working hard, be nice. Happy running, guys.